Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jen Marple Show. And as promised, we are back to having beautiful, fabulous guests. And I've got Karen Marginot on the show today, y'all. And she is the author that I mentioned last week's podcast, who I said made this big pivot basically as she was entering her 60th year on the earth. She decided to mix up her life, leave the corporate world, write a book, lose 60 pounds, and drastically change her life. And she is truly going to be an inspiration. This is going to be such a great talk today, y'all. And she has become a friend, and she is in my Stepping into the Spotlight program. We have a mutual friend, Lori Bishop, who has been on the podcast, who's a fabulous photographer and designer. And so never fear, everyone. You will meet the most fabulous women if you just open up your heart and mind to know that you will meet them, because they will appear before your very eyes. And Karen is one of those beautiful women in my life, and I'm honored to know her. And I'm so excited to bring her to you today. So she is the author of the shiny new book that is about to be released later this month, January 28th. Do I have that date right, Karen? January 28th. And it is called The Bad Girls Club: Promises of a Spiritually Based Recovery. And so we're going to get into what that all means. But Karen used to be an executive coach at Salesforce. So she had about a 20-year career at Salesforce. And then did I get that wrong?
It was about 10 years at Salesforce. I'd say 30 years in tech.
30 years in tech, 10 years at Salesforce. And she decided that she was done with it and that she was going to be a leadership coach and well-being coach. So we're going to get into her whole journey and why she made the change and get into all the things with her today. But let's just, let's give Karen a warm welcome, because I'm so excited to have you here today and to really dig into all the things, because I love the fact that, you've been a podcast listener, we've become friends, you're in the program, but you've also become a huge inspiration for me. And y'all, I have read part of her book, and she's been so kind as to lend me a sample of the entire book, and I can't wait to dig into it. But I've read many chapters, and you all hear me talk about authenticity and stepping into your true self and not giving a shit what anybody else thinks, and say the thing you want to say. And Karen has courageously gone out to say the thing that she wants to say and talk about her sobriety and some really heavy shit that happened back in her 20s. So without further ado, Karen, thank you for coming on the show today. And I'm so excited to have you here and cannot wait to dig in.
Oh, thank you, Jen. I am thrilled to be here. And it is just one of those wonderful things in life when you get to meet fabulous women like you. And like you said, when you open your heart and you open your mind and you put yourself out in the world, beautiful things happen. And I have this wonderful friendship with you, and also get to experience everything that we're doing, the work that we're doing in your mastermind. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank
Yay.
you.
So let's get into it. So I've alluded to the fact that you made a drastic change kind of going into your 60s. You're 62 now. And I know this is going to inspire everyone to really go for their dreams. You've got your kids out the door. You are, well, I'm not going to tell your story. I want you to tell the story. So tell us the things, like,
Yeah.
how did you have the courage, and what was the impetus to sort of leave the corporate realm and go, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do all these amazing things as I'm turning 60.
Yeah. That's a great question. It's a bit of a story. So when I was approaching, well, first of all, I want to back up to when I was a very little girl. When I was a very little girl, I was an avid reader. And I knew right about by the time I was 4 years old that I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be an author. I wanted to share stories with people because I couldn't think of anything more impactful than sharing stories with the world, right? So I had been writing my entire life. And did I show anybody any of my writing? No, absolutely not. I was convinced it was terrible. I had the perfectionism disease. It wasn't good enough. I needed to do more. It was never ready, all those things, right? So here I am approaching 60, and it's bugging me now. This story is coming up, and I'm like, oh God, I got to put this question to bed. Can I actually write or not? And I don't care what the answer is at this point. I just need to settle the question. So I was talking to a friend of mine about it. She said, "When are you going to write that book?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "You need to go on a writer's retreat." And I said, "Oh, that's a brilliant idea." So I got on the computer and I Googled writer's retreats, and I found one. It was fabulous. It was the perfect fit for me. It just resonated with me. And then I looked at the details, Jen, and it was in Kenya. And I said, okay, guess I'm going to Kenya. So I packed my bags and off to Kenya I went. And I met these amazing people. And one person in particular was a woman who was running the retreat, Sarah Bullen, who she wrote the foreword in my book. She's an international, multi-published international author, writing coach, agent. I said, I'm working with her and I'm working with the group and I'm doing my little bits of writing and I'm just beginning this story because this story was in the way of anything else coming out. This story was demanding to be told. So I'm writing it and I'm reading it out loud. And I said, I've flown halfway around the world. I will read my stuff out loud to you because if it's as bad as I think it's going to be, I will not run into you at Trader Joe's. I can just pretend this never happened, right? And they loved it. Everybody loved it. And Sarah encouraged me to keep going. And, we need, when we're facing our fears and we're facing our insecurities and we're taking a step forward into something that just scares the bejesus of us, there is nothing more impactful than the support of women in your life. Oh my gosh, and with that encouragement and that, the positive energy, I started writing it and I got to a place where I finished it. And right about at that same time, as I was close to finishing my book, there were some changes in my work life that were pretty catalytic to me. And I realized that that part of my life was complete. It was done. The things that I was being called to do or invited to do by the universe, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, your higher self, they no longer fit in that corporate world. But I was young enough still, energetic enough, healthy enough, and I thought, I'm gonna jump off and do this. I'm gonna do this thing. So I left my job, published the book through Kohler Books, which is coming out, and launched a business all in a 4-month period. And it was amazing.
Well, and never underestimate the power of listening to your intuition and the power of a woman on a mission because you hear me talk about it all the time on the show. Like, you're not too fucking old, and we're not. And I think when you're tapped into your soul's purpose, you have endless amounts of energy to achieve whatever you want. And I mean, we can all go back into our history of feeling like beaten down and we're doing things and it just felt so hard. But when you are tapped in and you, like you said, you knew this book had to come out, this new business had to come out of you, endless amounts of energy to do something when you're on your passion and purpose. And I firmly believe that is what midlife calls us to do. It's like we simply can't ignore those whispers anymore, whether you're doing a passion project on the side or it's full time. We simply can't not listen to that. And just think, if you didn't listen to it, we wouldn't have this beautiful book that's about to launch. That's going to really change so many lives. So let's get into the book.
Yes.
So I really want to get into the book and what the book is all about.
Yeah.
And like the big lessons in the book. So what is the book about? Like, why this book? Why now? Why was it the story that needed to be told?
Yeah, well, it almost felt to me like I didn't have a choice. It was just coming out of me. And initially, Jen, I got to be honest with you, I thought I was going to write it, print it out, stick it in a drawer, and my kids would find it when I was dead. But as I was passing out portions of it to readers, my beta readers, they all kept saying, this is going to be a book on shelves. This is important. So here's what's happening is, especially since the pandemic, and I really think a lot of the research shows that these numbers started really ticking up during the pandemic. When you think about the COVID pandemic, everybody was sent home. Lots of people were sent home. They're working from home. Daycare's closed, schools are closed. What happened to women was an incredible pressure cooker. Women, in certain years of their life, certain seasons of their life, they're managing, their families, they're managing, aging parents, they're managing children, they're managing their careers. It is a pressure cooker. And the few support systems that were in place for women were closed and down, not just temporarily, we're talking years. And I think that that's taken a toll on women. And when I started reading, there were some stories in the Washington Post about this, about how the number one demographic in this country that is drinking themselves to death the fastest are women. And it's because we need a pressure valve. We need a pressure release. We need some way of releasing or numbing those overwhelming feelings. So my story really is offered in service to women who may be struggling with this, and not just women. There's men out there too who are really struggling with this. When I think about addiction, and as you get into my story, you'll see that my path really entered with alcohol, ended with alcohol, did a lot of drugs in between. That's not always how addiction shows up, right? It's a common one, but it's not the only way that it shows up. So you can almost look at my story as an allegory. What I think about addiction now is when I am looking outside of myself to fill something inside myself in an unhealthy balance, right? It's a way to numb myself. It's a way of avoiding the feelings that come with overwhelming, pressured situations. It's not dealing with my feelings. It's all of those things, right? So people can run into this problem with, phones, sex, shopping, food, men, women, power, you name it. All of these things can get out of balance to the point where we are losing our lives because we're no longer present, right?
Ooh, there's so much there. And yeah, when you were talking about addictions, because I was really thinking too, like people can have exercise addictions, food addiction, shopping, and like it's a really good way to look at it. It's if you're looking at something outside yourself to kind of either fill the time, numb the pain, and that overwhelm. And I also want to rewind what you said about just that isolation and COVID. And I was already feeling when I started doing women's events a few years before COVID started, and I could already tell. I had a little hypothesis that I felt like women were really feeling disconnected. And that was even before COVID, but that was just in the age of social media, of, everybody like, oh, everyone's got this great life. No one's having these deep conversations. Then, of course, then COVID hit, and then everything was, everything just stopped. And I know, and myself included, like all of us, none of us knew. We're trying to manage homes and this and that. We don't know if the world's ending, if you're ever going to make money again, like what the hell is happening. And I look at my sister-in-law who had two young boys at the same time and trying to work and manage kids on Zoom. So I still think too, we're coming, I'm mentioning all this because I do think we had this major crisis as a society. And we're kind of like, oh, we're over it. That was just then. But I think that there's a lot of residual stuff that we're still dealing with because we were collectively traumatized. And I feel like, and there's so much other stuff going on in the world right now that we keep getting traumatized. We're like, when do we get to actually have a break? I don't know if that's ever going to be, possible, but
Yeah.
there is so much that we're dealing with, in regards to that. And we're still, a lot of us are still working from home and, people are like, and there's all these transitions of especially at our age group, like when kids are older and they're leaving the nest, so women have one set of friends and all of a sudden they don't have these friends anymore. Maybe people move away, so there's all this stuff that happens. So I'm glad that this book addresses kind of everything, and it's not just, you don't need to be like addicted to drugs and alcohol to get something from Karen's book. But can you share maybe like one of your stories and that pivotal moment? It was one of the chapters that you shared with me that really helped you, that beautiful woman, that nurse who helped change your life. I just would love to share that with your readers. Just give us a little bit of insight into the story and that transitional point that puts you onto that path of recovery.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, okay, that's great. When you meet me in my book, I was at the beginning of my bottoming out, and I was 23 at the time, right? And I just had these feelings that I was failing at everything. I had dropped out of school. I had failed at everything. I was falling apart from the inside out, and I was still trying to, get it done, right? Show up and look like I knew what I was doing. And I had gotten a job through a headhunter, really, who placed me at the National Academy of Sciences because of my astrology sign. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And so I'm there working at the National Academy of Sciences, and I wasn't there long. I was there about 6 weeks before my boss came to me and said, "I want to ask you if you have any special problems. Do you drink?" And I just remember how humiliating that felt. And I was angry and ashamed, the shame that comes up when you know people can see that, the masks you put on aren't working anymore. And I admitted that I was a little stressed out and I had some personal problems and I was drinking a little bit. And she handed me this like post-it note with a phone number on it and said, "We will help you if you would like help. And if you want help, call this number. There's someone on the other side waiting for your call." And I watched my hand as I went back to my desk pick up the phone. And I thought, what am I doing? What am I doing? Dialed the number. The woman said, "Karen, I'm waiting for you. Come down the hall." So I went down the hall and it was the head nurse. And she loomed over me, scared me to death, said, "You are a drug addict. You're an alcoholic. If you don't do exactly what I say, you will die." And I was terrified. I just, she was 6 feet tall, just back in my chair, and she had everything planned out. She said, "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to go to a place called a treatment center," which is what they were called in 1985. Um, and she came with me that night to my family's house, to my parents' house. She stood with me while I explained to my parents what was happening. She drove me the next morning to Reagan National Airport, put me on a plane, and off I went. And I didn't know how much my life would be changing. And I'm going to tell you one more story about her. So I lost track of her, and she was a bit older than me. And she, wasn't on the grid anywhere. I've looked for her for years, on and off. Just a month and a half ago, her face popped up on Facebook, and I found her. And I contacted her and I said, "I think you were someone who really changed my life." And we ended up getting together for lunch. I could give her a hug, show her my 39-year chip from AA, and thank her for really saving my life. I don't know what I would have done without her.
I love that. Angels show up in many, many different ways. And I'm so happy. I'm just happy to hear that story. And I remember when you had posted that, that warmed my heart because so many people do this important work and they might never hear back from whoever they were helping. And it's nice to know that she was, that you could acknowledge her and tell her how important, that moment in time was, because we wouldn't be talking here today if she
No.
hadn't reached her hand out and said, "I'm here to help you." Like no questions asked type thing. God, I love that story. So, if women aren't suffering from addiction or they don't think they are,
Yeah.
and just we're all listening, like how can your book help all of us?
You know, it's interesting because I mean I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not in any way a medical person or a counselor, so I can't give any kind of advice on that level. However, what I do have is experience. And what I can tell you, you really got me thinking about this when you were talking about the COVID situation, even pre and post COVID, what's happening in our lives, and that reignition of trauma and trauma response and the fear that people feel and layoffs looming and wondering about survival. And we've got, all kinds of things going on in the world right now and how that can affect us. Here's what recovery has given me is I've got a solid core in me that feels contented, peaceful, centered, and grounded, regardless of what's going on around me. Now, that doesn't mean I don't lose my temper or get angry or irritated. I am a human being, but I've got this unbelievable grounding in me now and a belief that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to know what to do. I'm going to be able to handle this. There was a large part of my life where I believed I really couldn't handle things. Um, I thought that I looked outside of myself. I looked at women like you. I looked at, what I would call very successful women, and I think they know something that I don't know, right? They seem so effortless in their lives. I didn't realize that everybody struggles with this stuff, right? Everybody does. And that it's okay to be open about that. It's okay to let people know it's not easy. It's okay to know that, to let people know that you're struggling. And I think it's really important for all of us to be real about that because our stories are needed to make it safe for everybody to get to a better place, right? You need to know that it's possible.
Can you share with us then, like what if is are there steps? Are there tools? So what you mentioned, like just being able to, have that recovery framework, because
Yeah.
we talked to you about, you could be recovering perfectionist, high, raising my hand, overachiever, raising my hand,
Yeah.
everyone listening has something that they're dealing with. So
Right.
what are those tools or tips, or what are those things that can help just all of us kind of get that grounding and that centeredness that you're talking about?
Yeah. I think I always start with kindness, right? So I have two boys that I raised as a single parent. And I remember one time shortly after my marriage ended, my boys were like, oh, they must have been about 7 and 4 at the time. And we're rushing to get out the door, right? I just got home from work. We got to get to baseball. We got to do this. I got dinner going. Okay, let's go, let's go, let's go. Grab your backpack, you have your water bottle. And I stopped. I was in that frenzy. We got to go. We got to go. It's traffic. And I stopped and I looked at my youngest son, Anton. He was about 4 at the time. And he was looking up at me with this beautiful face, and he was so confused. He was so confused. And I could see in that moment, he was trying so hard to do everything I was asking him to do. But my inner chatter in my brain of how I drive myself was coming out of my mouth at this 4-year-old. And it just stopped me cold. It just stopped me cold. And that's when I realized I needed to get a handle on that inside voice. How did I do that? It's kindness. It's through kindness is where I started. And there are so many tools out there. So for me, what worked is kindness, becoming aware of the chatter in my head and realizing that's not actually me. It's just old tapes, it's old voices. You can work with a coach or a therapist or somebody to get to the origins of those. Mindfulness meditation or any form of meditation really is very helpful. And getting in your body, I think, is extremely helpful. For a lot of us, we live from the neck up, right? And we forget that we have so much wisdom in our body. And when we tap into that, when we're able to really listen to it, that's our early warning signals. And it gives us early warnings about not only things that are truly not great for us, but also the joy. That's where we tap into play and joy. And if we're just neck up, we're missing so much of the richness of life.
Oh, I love that. You just got me a little emotional talking about your kids because and my listeners have heard this. When my little ones were little, I was a crazed person with my first business, and I didn't have the tools that I have now, and I was yelling and screaming at everyone simply because I was overwhelmed. I do give myself compassion for that point in time in life. I had nothing. I had nothing. I was just trying to do the best that I could. We were all trying to do the best that we could. But just you just made me like realize that now I look at those babies and I'm just like, oh, they're still those little 5-year-olds with for me,
Oh,
and they're not. And thankfully they don't remember those early those early times, but I do. But I know a
yeah.
lot of women listening, like we are overwhelmed and we snap at the people closest to us, which are our kids, our spouses, our partners. And it's hard. So I know, and I've said this before, like the most important work we can do is that work on ourselves, right? And just staying in touch. So I want to switch it up a little bit because you wrote this book and it's about addiction and recovery and your story, and you also launched like an executive coaching business at the same time. And one of my first questions I asked when I met you is, how do these two things meet?
That's a
How does the book meet
yeah. Yeah.
this transformational coaching that you do? And I know I know what you're gonna say, but tell us how that meets. And then just so people can understand like how tapping into your authentic self helps with all aspects of life, especially your leadership.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, leadership to me we are at a crucial time, especially in our country right now with leadership and really understanding what leadership means. And it's not a title, it's not a salary, it's not a position, and it's in all areas of our life, right? It's within our families, it's within our communities, it's within our school systems, and yes, it is in our work life. But if I can't lead myself, right. If I can't lead myself and listen to what is truly in alignment for me and my values in this time, I cannot lead other people. I can't be a leader in my family. I can't walk my talk. And that to me is the essence of true leadership. And I'm really about transformational leadership right now because transformed, healthy, holistic leadership affects every area of our life. Poor leadership affects every area of our life, right? It determines oftentimes what's available to us in terms of, work, where we live, where our children go to school, what healthcare is available to us. It affects every aspect of the quality of our life. So if we want better things for ourselves and better things for our family, then it really helps to tap into our own inner leaders, embrace the truth of who we are, let go of everything that really isn't us, and trust that we're all being called to be exactly who we are in this moment and offer that. I mean, can you imagine how transformed the world would be if everybody showed up with all the gifts they are supposed to give? And that doesn't mean you don't do work. And that doesn't mean that you don't work on yourself. And it doesn't mean that you don't grow. But having that integrity and awareness and do it intentionally really promotes a lot of health and honesty and truth.
I love that. And we've definitely talked about that on the show. And I want to go into a little bit deeper because you mentioned, women, like we are the leaders. We're mostly the leaders of our homes. We're definitely leaders in our communities. And if we're showing up at school, I mean, if you want anything done, it's like ask women, ask a working mom, right? If you want, like, I kind of like was looking around just to digress. Like, remember during COVID, I'm like, we could solve all the problems. Just ask all the moms. We'll build a freaking tent and have a school up
Absolutely.
and running in 24 hours. I mean, like, are you nuts? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so the power of all of us, it never ceases to amaze me. But what I do know is talking to so many women that women are tapped in, and I feel like everybody truly does know who they are. You just have to sit and listen. But it feels really scary to
Yeah.
show up as your whole self.
Oh my goodness. I had a reputation at Salesforce for being the courageous communicator because I would, it is too exhausting for me to try to be something that I'm not. I think I've just gotten to that point in life where it's just not worth it to me, right? I'm gonna be all in. Now that doesn't mean I hope I'm not inappropriate. And I also understand that part of that package is I'm not for everybody, right? Not everybody's gonna like me. And I had to get to a place where I was really okay with that. The people, when I put myself out there, and this is a large part of what the latter half of my book really talks about, is how did I go from point A of being a bottoming out, addict to recovering to the point where I felt safe and trusted myself. I don't need to trust society. I know what society's got for me. I need to trust myself that if I stand in my integrity, let go of everything that truly isn't me, truly isn't aligned with me, and that changes all the time, right? Because we're growing, and offer that my people will find me, and that has been true. That has absolutely been true for me. I don't have fear about the things I used to be afraid of. I don't have fear of financial insecurity anymore. I was more stressed out about money when I was working in tech. Um, I have a belief in myself because I'm operating from a place of integrated values and alignment.
Ooh, integrated values and alignment. I love that. So when you were talking about being afraid, and I'm sure you're probably more afraid in the tech world because it's very male driven and it's the paradigm. I worked in tech for a hot second, so I know it. And I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I'm surrounded by it. And people joke about bro culture and all of this, and I think it's just for the longest time, women, we've had to play within the confines of like this male, and we still are like this patriarchal world. That's a hard one to get out.
Yep.
And so, we act how we act and how we did because it was safe. And
Right.
that's what we saw. And that's what other people were modeling for us. And if we kind of went outside that box, it could mean like we got fired, we lost our job, we didn't get the client, whatever the hell it is. And so, and I'm loving this time in life. Like I'm seeing more women leaders rise, and the more, I always say the more you are, the more your people are going to come to you.
Yes.
But it's not as easy as saying like just be you, because I know there's all that programming, like you said, just society has what it wants for us. And I talk about it all the time. And you have to actively say, that's not me, it's society. This is a new way of being. And at the other side of that, and just stepping into who you are, you're going to get sort of what you want, and you're going to attract those ideal people in your world, be it friends, new relationships,
Yeah.
any type of thing, work, clients, all of it. um and it is a battle, I never want to like sugarcoat that, just wake up and be yourself, because it's the number one question I get in feedback from women is they're fearful. It's really scary.
It is super scary. It is super scary. And, when I was younger, actually, I did this my entire life, Jen. When something wasn't working, I tried to fit in, I tried to fit in, I tried to stay in the bro culture, I tried to do this, I tried to be something that I wasn't. I was either getting burned out, stressed out, sick. I mean, I went through a bout of, walking pneumonia at a job one time that I just couldn't shake for like a year and a half. It was bananas. Um, there was some sort of negative, consequence from that. Um, but I would just make a change. I would just jump. I would say, I can't stand this job. My boss is terrible. This is wrong. That is wrong. And I would try to problem solve for it, right? And I would hop to something next. I never gave myself the time to really transition and deepen in the transition and feel every single nuance of what that transition period would offer me. And that gave me time. So I did that this time. I actually took a leave of absence from Salesforce last fall, finished writing the book. And by the time December rolled around, I was going back to work in January. I knew that part of my life was complete. But I didn't know what I was going to yet. The book hadn't been picked up by any publishers yet. I didn't have any, I'm not born wealthy. I don't have money raining from the trees. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew that was complete. So I said, okay, I'm going to stay in the space of not knowing, and something will come, and I will know when it's time to actually make the change. And it took 7 months, right? 7 months for me to decide to make that change and that I was ready. And that time gave me everything I needed to work through all my fears and to check in with myself and to get stronger in my own being able to walk my authenticity. It's one thing to know and to feel it, but it's an entirely different thing to walk it, right? The last thing, of course, that I had to really confront was my relationship with money. And how am I gonna, I'm gonna lose that fat salary, you know? And then in the middle of the night one night, I just woke up with this bolt of a realization that, wait a minute, what if I'm limiting myself with this number in my head? What if I'm actually worth double that or triple that? I could do whatever I want. I could reinvest in women's businesses. I could give to causes. What is stopping me from earning more? And that was the last bit of handcuffs that I needed to let go of. And it was the most freeing moment. And that's when the last bit of fear left me.
Oh, I love that. And you're also bringing up a good point too, because I know we're at the beginning of the year and women want to make changes. And you did it really smartly and safely too, by giving yourself the time versus like burning all the boats and burning the bridges and just quitting the job and waking up. And that can feel scary, because I do know if you do something like that, then it puts a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on this new thing. And you don't know quite yet if it's going to work out. And you're still working through, and especially if people haven't been entrepreneurs before, it's a different mindset and a different way of being, and you've got to get comfortable being in that spot. So I'm never a fan of burning it all down. See what you can do on the side. So you did it in a very healthy way. um God, I love this. This is so inspirational. This is such a great podcast to have at the beginning of the year, because anything is possible. I say it all the time, anything is possible. And listening to your tools, we're going to read your book. But I want to ask you sort of a final businessy type of question. And that's, I know, because we're at the beginning of the year, women are kind of like, okay, I got through the holidays. There are women who have been sitting on dreams and are now thinking, all right, it's January. I want to do something. I want to write that book. I want to like, it could even just be, I want to go take that new exercise class. I want to find love. I want to finally start a business or quit this job that's soul sucking.
Yeah.
Like, what is your biggest piece of advice for that woman who's right now, okay, it's January. I've been sitting on the sidelines. I want to do something, but they're too afraid to get going. They're still not there yet. What would you say to them?
Give yourself permission. Really. But that's what it was for me. And it may be something different for other women, but for me, it was a huge thing for me to give myself permission to try something. If it didn't work, and as long as I'm still breathing, I could make a different choice, right? And that kind of addressed a little bit of that perfectionism in me too, right? But give myself permission to play with the idea, to take one action. The other thing too is build your community. You do not need to do all of this alone. You really shouldn't do all of this alone. It's too much for any one person to do it. So find your community, find your support system. I realized, especially after talking and interviewing several entrepreneurs way before I made the leap, what was the one thing that they had underestimated about making that change? And they all said the same thing, the loss of community that's just built in and handed to you in a corporation, right? So I was intentional about building my community beforehand so that I could had a soft place to step into.
Ooh, that's great advice. And we talk about community a lot. I couldn't have done anything I'm doing without the support, different community, just different groups. I have different groups for everything like exercise, business, parenting. I've got, surround myself and you have to make it a priority. Like you said, you've got to make it a priority. It's not just going to magically appear. But the beautiful thing is there are people out there and you're listening to the show. So you've got me, you've got Karen in your corner, you've got us in your corner right now supporting you. Those are really great bits of advice. So I've got a final couple bit of questions for you. And I know you'll love this one. What do you think the best thing is about being in midlife?
Oh my gosh, you finally get to lay down all the F's. You get zero F's, and it's delightful and freeing. Yes.
Zero F's. We love it. We can just say zero fucks on here because we have the explicit. We have the
That's
explicit
true.
on this podcast
Zero
because our
fucks.
tagline is "You're not too fucking old." Zero
Absolutely.
fucks. It's really, truly one of the most liberating things because when you say that too, it means you're not caring what people think.
No.
You're giving fear the middle finger. And I do want to acknowledge something you said before too, and you're just reminding me. I don't just popped in my head again when you said thinking about your salary, and you're like, that could actually be a limit. I just want to
Yes.
highlight that again because we have
Yes.
to often think like, how good can it get? Because we've just been sold these salary
Yeah.
levels, right? Because
Yes.
it's that old paradigm because we've all been like little cogs in the worker bee wheel of when we're working in corporate. So there's these natural limits. So we gauge against these natural sort of limits and how much you should charge and what you should do. And it's kind of a limit, but we can do whatever the hell we want.
And you can tap into what you think you're worth, right? Instead of relying on I'm sorry, patriarchal capitalistic system that really isn't working for many people at all anymore, right?
Yeah, none. And I mentioned I'm probably not going to shut up about that Demi Moore speech from the Golden Globes for a
Yes.
really long time, but even some who's at the top of her game, who's made studios gazillions, was put in her little box. You're a popcorn actress, and you're never going to be enough. And you start to believe that we've all been sold the same kind of bill of goods, and it's just breaking free from those chains and knowing that the sky's the limit. And the only reason we have these negative thoughts is because they've just been programmed into us. So,
That we chose to believe them.
yep.
There's a certain point in midlife where you can ask yourself the question, is this even part of my reality anymore? And do I want it to be? And it's as simple as that. Just let it go.
Yeah. And, everyone can use my mantra. I think I launched it last year. I'm like, whatever. It's like, I'm too fucking fabulous for this shit. When all else fails, write that on a sticky and put it on your mirror in the bathroom when you go to brush your teeth in the morning and just go, I just am. I'm just too fabulous for this.
Absolutely.
So everybody at the end of the show, completes the sentence, the phrase, "You're not too fucking old too." So Karen, You're not too fucking old, too.
Live a life that exceeds your dreams.
Love it. I love it. So tell us all the things. The book is launching at the end of the month,
Yes.
and I know you've got a couple exciting things coming up. So tell us about all the things and where we can buy the book and support you and
Okay.
find you, all the
So
stuff.
absolutely. The book is available now for pre-order everywhere you buy books. So Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, bookshop.org, wherever you buy, it is available. It's going to be coming out in hardback, paperback, Kindle. Audiobook is in production now, will be out in about 2 to 3 months. To find out about upcoming events and to stay in touch with what's happening with the book launch, you can go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. That's probably the fastest way to stay in touch. And then, yes, please attend my launch party. It will be held in Alexandria, Virginia on the 28th, but I'm also live streaming it for people, my friends around the world and on the West Coast. So it's going to be live streamed on Instagram and Facebook.
Ooh, I love it. So we're going to link all that in the show notes. And two fun facts I forgot to mention. Well, one, so Karen is in Alexandria, and that's actually where I was born. And
Oh,
I haven't spent a ton of time on the East Coast. I've never been back to Alexandria. My dad was in the Army when I was born. So it was an Army hospital. So I was there for like a month. That's where
wow.
I was born. So Alexandria, I will get back there someday to see the fall foliage. And y'all, Karen was so kind, as she asked me to like blurb her book. So yours truly has a quote on her book cover. And I am just so honored and touched that you asked me to do that for you. So I mean, that just like that made me teary. I was very honored to be a part of this process. So everybody, you're going to attend her book launch because we can do it live stream. I wish I could fly out to Alexandria, but alas, I cannot. But I will be there for the live stream, and we're going to link everything in the show notes. And just way to go! Like way to fucking go! You wrote your book. You're changing your life. You're doing it all in your 60s. There's no limit to anything that we can do. And so thank you for being sort of a beacon for all of us. And I've told you a million times, like you inspire me every day. And ladies, I hope this inspires you to just go for it. Just go for it because you get to do what you want to do. So thanks for being here, Karen. And best of luck with the book launch. I know it's going to be a smashing success. And I can't wait to see you online live launching this puppy in a few weeks.
Thank you so much, Jen. I love this.